Welcome to Quality Time with MoreSteam. I am your host, Dan Swartout. We are lucky enough to be joined today by MoreSteam's Vice President of Business Development and Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, Ken Robinette. Ken, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Dan. How you doing?
I am fantastic. I'm really excited to chat with you today. You have so much experience in the lean space. You've been at MoreSteam now for almost a year, but a long career as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt before that. A lot of interesting things you've done. But I want to get started with this. Before you were quarterbacking business development for MoreSteam, you were quarterback for Crestline High School. And I am going back to the Mansfield, Ohio News Journal from Thursday, September 6, 1984, where you were nominated for News Journal High School Football Player of the Week with this incredible performance: 172 passing yards on 9 of 16 completions for 3 touchdowns, including the game winner with 56 seconds left and a 21-19 win over Buckeye Central. What a performance, Ken.
Oh, thank you, Dan. You've gone deep into the archives to find those articles. A lot of research there. A lot of research there.
I imagine that being the quarterback of a football team taught you a lot about leadership. And of course, being a leader is a lot of what being a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt is all about, correct?
It is, Dan.
So, are there any things that you've learned from your high school football days, your athletic days, that prepared you for your career in the lean space?
I think there are a couple of things that stand out, right? And it might sound a little cliche, but one of the things that has kind of held true is if you put in the work, you'll get the results. And as you're young, or if you're and you're working through any type of sport, you got to practice, you got to condition, you got to put the work in to get the results. So that's the same in anything you do, and especially in Lean Six Sigma, where you're trying to solve problems that have stood the test of time. If they were easy to fix, they have already been fixed. So you've got to put the work in, you've got to put the time in to figure out what's going on and work to solve them. And then the other thing is if you make a mistake, you got to dust it off, let it go, and you got to make the next play better. So if you're out there and you think you've got a solution that's going to solve a big problem, and the solution just doesn't work, you've got to be willing to say, hey, it's not the right thing right now. Let's look for the next thing. And I think those are two things that kind of stand out when you look at sports, football, quarterbacking, Lean Six Sigma, problem solving. You got to put the work in, and if you make a mistake, you got to let it go and get on to the next play. So those are the things I think I can tie out there for you, Dan.
As a quarterback, if you throw an interception, you cannot think about that interception on your next drop back. You have to focus on what you have to do on that play.
That's for sure, Dan. And there's enough Monday morning quarterbacks to tell you about the mistake you made. You better not be thinking about it too much.
Are there Monday morning quarterbacks in Lean Six Sigma as well?
Oh, there are lots of them, Dan, lots of them. So, I've tried this before. It didn't work. All this lean stuff, we don't need it. The fact of the matter is that problems don't fix themselves. You got to invest in the people. You got to train. Got to make mistakes, learn, develop, just like a sports team has to do.
Ken, you went to Kent State after your career at Crestline, and I just found out from you just recently that you actually tried to walk on the Kent State football team.
Yes, the cleats weren't nearly fast enough, Dan. So it was time to hang up those cleats and move on to something more interesting called aerospace engineering. So decided that I couldn't run fast, so maybe I could make jets fly fast.
Why aerospace engineering? That's not a very common major that you hear people go into.
Well, Dan, it's a kind of like my career. It's kind of a twisted story, but I went to Kent State for their aerospace flight program.
Okay.
So I wanted to be a pilot, and I was going down that path, and I had a medical exam, and I found out that I had stigmatism in my eyes. And one of the things that pilots at that time, and it may still be the case, I don't know today, but stigmatism in flying doesn't go very well, especially with commercial pilots. So I opted to head down the engineering path and stay close to flight and the things that I was very interested in, and studied how to build and design and go down that path. So once again, if you find out something, you got to be able to adjust, adapt, move forward, and figure out what's next.
Were you introduced at all to lean concepts and principles, Lean Six Sigma, during your college education?
Not in my college education. It's very focused on the mechanics and design and building of systems. But I would say systems thinking and Six Sigma are very closely linked. You need to look at the beginning of the process, the middle, the end. You got to understand how the inputs interface with the processes and create outputs. So a lot of that engineering training and problem solving basics were developed in college. But my first exposure to really the quality world was in my first job. We were going down the path of implementing an ISO 9000 program because one of our customers at my first employer decided that if you're going to be a supplier, you have to be ISO 9000 certified. And I was on the team that got to start down that process. Very small company, 100 people. So when you're at a small company with 100 people and a big company that's your number one customer says you're going to do something, everybody gets to participate, much like here at MoreSteam, where we wear a lot of different hats, we touch a lot of different things. But from early on, it's been around that idea of quality's got to be built into what you do, and it's fantastic to be continuing to learn and grow and focus on things like that in my career.
When you were first introduced to the world of quality, was it through a formal training program? Was it observation? Was it learning on the job? How did that come about?
I went to a seminar at Northern Illinois University, and it was called Total Quality Management back then, TQM. And that phrase has, some people still know it, some people don't use it. And then I got a little taste of it, and I was actually in a sales engineer role. I was in an inside sales job, but I was on this committee that was implementing this ISO 9000 process at the company, and I got a little taste of quality and how to apply it and working with people and solving problems. And I decided to go back to graduate school, so I went to the Illinois Institute of Technology. And in my master's program, I was focused on operations and quality management. And I really got a deep dive into Lean and Six Sigma. At the time of that, it wasn't really called Lean. It was referred to as the Toyota Production System. And then you had Six Sigma out there just beginning. And then you had a lot of different things around the Duran zero defects. You had Deming talking about out of the crisis and the 14 points. So you had a lot of kind of thought leaders coming together in the early 90s and really starting that quality movement that kind of moved through U.S. manufacturing from the late 80s through the 90s. I really got kind of caught up in that and learned a lot about quality in those formative years of my career.
What was the first moment where something really came together for you in the quality world? I know for me, for example, the first time I looked at something and was like, oh, I totally get this. For me, it was the idea of operational definition. In another life, Ken, in another life, I traveled the country as a stand-up comedian. And I did shows all over the country, and I did a lot of shows for a lot of private companies. And the one thing that they'd always tell me is to keep it clean. When I'm doing a private show for a business, keep it clean. Well, clean could mean a lot of different things. Clean could mean my 5-year-old could be in the front row, or clean could mean you can say everything except one word. And that's a wide, wide definition of clean. So when I saw operational definition, that everyone's on the same page as to what the definition is, that really struck me from another life that I had led as a stand-up comedian. Did you have a similar moment for you like that?
I did, Dan, and it happened. Fortunately for me, it happened pretty early in my career, and it was a situation where I had moved out of a sales engineer role into a design engineer role and into a shop floor supervisor, machine shop supervisor. So I'm early 20 something. I'm toying around with graduate school. I'm learning all these new concepts, and I've got a team of 35, 40 people working for me, and most of them are my dad's age or older. So, think about this. I'm a snot-nosed kid. I'm out there on the floor. I'm talking to all these old curmudgeons, and they're machinists, and we've got this huge problem. We're way behind. We've got a lot of back orders. We've got customers that are talking about moving their business away from us. And I'm trying to get folks to think about this idea of flow and pull and working things in, first out order, where they had always been working things in, hey, I want to do the easy job or the job that I know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do changeovers. If we do changeovers, we're going to lose money. So I'm in this situation trying to find a way to get this group of folks to kind of see the waste, see the opportunity, and we just started toying with, hey, if we subgroup parts, or if we move these machines in a different way, or if we turn this product this way, and we just started doing some kind of learn as you go, read something in the book, go out, try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. And, it wasn't all 35 people, but 4 or 5 people kind of took an interest in it. And 2 of those people were like the informal leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the time, I didn't know this was what's going on. I'm giving you my reverse look perspective. But finding those informal leaders and being able to apply basic concepts of problem solving that they hadn't thought about, and you see that enlightenment or that energy happening in them, and then they pass it on to other folks within their work group, the amount of things we were able to change and the speed at which we did it was amazing. And we took out 4 weeks of lead time in a product. So we went from taking 6 weeks to turn an order around to 2 weeks. And we cleared up all the back orders. We were able to respond to customers, and the company had its best performing year ever, and we didn't lose any customers. So it was like, wow, this really works. This is good stuff. And anybody that's out there that is kind of working on something, that excitement you get when something that hadn't been solved before gets solved, you kind of get that. You kind of get that energy. And so maybe like that operational definition and keeping it clean. This idea of voice of customer, being able to respond to their orders and get things out in a timely fashion, even in today's world, as hyper connected as everything has become with all the technology, folks don't want to wait. They want to wait less now than ever before. So if you're able to meet expectations of your customer, usually good things happen. So that's kind of that moment for me, is that voice of customer. Get that image into the key people in your organization, make some changes, celebrate the results. That's kind of where I got it, and I try to create that everywhere I've gone. And it's sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, but if you can create that moment, it really makes a difference.
You mentioned informal leaders, and I think that's a really interesting point I'd like to touch upon further. I would imagine that the kids today would call informal leaders influencers. It's important to get these influencers on board, right? How do you do that? And how do you identify those informal leaders, those influencers who can help you get your message across?
And so, I don't know that there's a precise recipe, but one thing for sure is, if you're a leader and you're looking for the informal leaders, all you have to do is kind of observe, and you'll see in a group, who do they gravitate to? Who's getting the questions? Who are folks kind of that go-to person? And usually, sometimes it can be their boss, but before they go to their boss, they might go to that influencer or that informal leader and pose the question or ask the question, or when they're stuck, they go get that help, right? So for me, I'm always looking for, where's that social network at? Who are the folks kind of going to? Who's going out and asking if they can help folks, right? So, you can kind of get a feel for who's willing to put themselves out to do that little bit extra.
Mm-hmm.
Often those are your informal leaders. And sometimes, unfortunately, your informal leaders might be the most outspoken about what management's doing because they haven't been included. So the flip around of that is, who's the loudest complainer, and how do you work with them to make sure that they can understand, so that they're not complaining that they're actually trying to move things forward. So maybe two answers there in one. Sometimes maybe on the positive side, sometimes maybe on that not so positive side.
As your career progressed, obviously you got more involved in Lean Six Sigma, in continuous improvement, in operational excellence. When did it come about that you sought certification, became certified? How did that process come about? Because I imagine you were initially certified as a green belt, right?
Well, it's a little different for me, Dan, because I worked for some companies where the discussion of certification really wasn't an individual decision. When I went to work for the Danaher Corporation is very into the Danaher business system. So I actually got into the lean, today's term lean side of things first. And it wasn't really, hey, sign me up. It was like, okay, you're a supervisor in our organization. Here are the tools, techniques, and methods of how we run our company. And it happened to be we design things around flow, we do work cells, we do continuous improvement. And so my job took me down the path of really getting into the formal part of lean. I worked there for a period of time, and then I did a job change and I went to work for an organization called General Electric. And General Electric at that time, I got hired into
A
a
few
black
people,
belt
a
job.
few people have heard of General Electric, I
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah, that's that small company, General Electric, at the time. I think 550,000 employees at that time. So I got hired in to the organization as a black belt, and I remember the very first day of work, I met one of my peers, and it said, "Hey, you're a black belt. You better get that Six Sigma stuff." So I was like, "Okay, this is a good note from a coworker. I'm a black belt. I better get the Six Sigma stuff." And that's really where I got into the training and certification process around black belts. So I got the lean piece in one organization, I got the black belt piece in another organization. And when the two kind of practices started to come together as Lean Six Sigma, I was kind of already there as a mutt. So then I've kind of leveraged that experience and training to help others get their mind around and drive improvements in a plethora of organizations, not only in organizations I've worked with, but also in coaching opportunities I've had through my career and touching folks outside of the industry I work and into places I never thought I would see actually as an aerospace engineer.
The lean side, you've had a lot of familiarity with. Obviously, as you're getting into the Six Sigma side, you're dealing with a lot of statistics, you're dealing with math, you're dealing with something that maybe you hadn't been dealing with before. What was it like taking on the Six Sigma side and tackling that after having all the experience in the lean side before?
Yeah, and the Six Sigma side has a lot of structure, and you've got a lot of work around that analyze phase. So, and I think what it taught me more than anything else was you've got to go slow to go fast. So sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment and you're doing a short interval improvement on a problem on the shop floor, you may not be looking at the whole system and understanding where all the pieces are connected. So for me, it was, taking that step back, collecting the data, making sure that my hypothesis or my initial thought was supported by data. And to be honest, I had to lean on some of the master black belts and coaches that I had to freshen up those statistics skills because it had been quite a while since I had applied any statistics to what I was doing. And the statistics I had was as a student where all the answers are kind of in the book. And
Uh-huh.
when you're applying this stuff in a process, it just doesn't come and tell you, hey, here's the information you need. So a lot of it was around how to ask the right question to get the information so that I could actually validate and show that things were working. So, I think the Six Sigma side really kind of drove in that how do you ask the right questions to make sure you're looking wide enough and deep enough to get to root cause. So, that's why I feel that in a lot of cases we get into this, oh, is it lean or is it Six Sigma? I say it doesn't matter. Look at the problem, understand the problem, apply what you need to apply to solve the problem. The wider your toolbox, the more things you can fix. The more narrow your toolbox, the less you can fix. So if you want to be able to fix more complex things, make sure you got all the tools in the toolbox.
Usually at this point in the show, the number one tool in my toolbox is this short message. MoreSteam's enterprise process improvement platform includes the tools, training, and software you need to transform your organization into a problem-solving powerhouse. Join the ranks of Fortune 500 companies that trust MoreSteam for their enterprise process improvement. Our integrated approach featuring training, project tracking and execution, simulations, and statistical analysis empowers your team to create a culture where structured problem solving becomes second nature. Visit moresteam.com to learn more. And now, back to my discussion with Ken Robinette. As you put all of the tools together, you eventually became certified as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. That's a pretty impressive qualification. How did you go about that certification process? What's that like? Somebody who's just starting to learn all these principles and concepts, and they see a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, that can be a daunting journey. And you got there. So what was it like when you finally made that step to become certified as a Master Black Belt?
Well, one of the things I would say is that the certification process I went through, I had done enough of the project work that I had the portfolio. So the first thing that you have to do is you've got to do enough work that you've been able to, and the word master, it carries lots of different definitions, kind of like when you said, hey, operational definitions. For me, it meant I could walk into a situation and be able to at least start the ideas of what do I need to look for, what do I need to ask, who do I need to get involved. So as I started to get good enough at working projects that I could then go into a situation and understand it, at least at a high level, I began to be able to coach. And so it was less about running projects and more about coaching and helping others get projects done. And then as you start that coaching process, you start moving down to the Master Black Belt. So a lot of the Master Black Belt certification was around demonstrating that, yes, you had learned it and you could do the high-end statistics and the different tools and techniques. But a bigger part of it was, can you coach and get things done through others? So that leadership side is really where I had to develop, because as a practitioner of Lean and Six Sigma and being really good at it, sometimes you get into where you're just doing the work and you're not letting others get things done. And then you're not really showing folks how to solve problems to actually have bigger impacts. So for me, the certification process was stepping back and let others do things, letting them make the mistakes, keeping them in bounds, and then getting that certification. So, but once again, some folks will say, hey, this is my end state. For me, it kind of just happened as I continued to look at and develop over my career. I ended up in a full-time quality role where my job was to teach others, pass on what I had learned, and help expand the problem solving and solution thinking in the organization. And it was a great step in my career.
Going back to sports, is this an analogy that might work? A lot of times, the greatest players don't always make the greatest coaches because they expect all the players to be as great as they were. So maybe they're not necessarily the greatest coaches. Is that something you kind of have to overcome to be a coach as a Master Black Belt?
I definitely think it's a risk, Dan. So I think this idea, especially when you get into some of this idea of humble leadership and passing on praise to others, all of these things around, if you're the expert and you believe that your expertise is your power and you're holding on to that expertise and you want to be the one that always has the answer, I think it will limit how effective you can be in organizations and how effective you can be as a leader. So I think the analogy does tie out. The greatest hitter may not be the greatest hitting coach because it's really been about them, their mindset, their approach, and not necessarily how do I transfer that to other people. So I think that's a great analogy.
Ken, we're talking about coaching, and you've done a lot of coaching, not just in the organizations you've worked for, but also you've done coaching as part of the Center of Operational Excellence here at Ohio State. And I know we've talked about the Center for Operational Excellence on the show before with Peg Pennington. Tell me a little bit about some of the coaching you've done through that organization.
So, Dan, it's great that you bring that up because, being a Central Ohio person and being around the Buckeyes and Ohio State, kind of the idea that you can be involved in kind of paying forward, which is a motto that goes back to sports and Woody
Mm-hmm.
Hayes. For me, the COE is an opportunity for me to learn as well as coach and teach. So it's a really unique opportunity inside of the Master of Business of Operational Excellence, the MBOE, because I've gotten to meet surgeons. There's surgeons that come to that program. There's anesthesiologists, physicians. There's executives, CEOs. So the cross section of people that I've gotten to meet through the 11 to 12 years that I've spent coaching in that program, and every single opportunity is a completely different, new, and exciting thing. So when I was working with the surgeon from a large health system in Minnesota, and they were working on a really complex problem, so far removed from anything I'd done in manufacturing or in my career, I'm in the operating room working with a surgeon, helping solve a problem. It was just a moment that it was like, wow, this stuff really does work. You don't have to be in a manufacturing environment to apply continuous improvement, lean, Six Sigma problem solving. The issue there were communication breakdowns between the different specialists in the operating room. So the anesthesiologist wasn't necessarily connecting with the surgeon. The surgeon wasn't necessarily connecting with the nurses because they all had a very specific specialty that they were focused on. And when we stepped back and created the solution, it was, how do you get the input from that entire team of folks working in that environment? And I've been able to leverage some of those lessons I've learned coaching folks on these projects that are so far removed from my day job that then I can then come back and get better at what I do in my day job. So that coaching is, if you develop that skill of asking questions, always looking for the next question, not the next answer, and letting the team actually get connected. Very powerful stuff, Dan, and probably one of the most interesting and rewarding things I've done outside of my day-to-day job is the work I've done inside of the COE and MBOE activities at Ohio State.
You are, even though you went to Kent State, you are truly a Buckeye, Ken. I know you have a tremendous tailgate before every Ohio State football game here in Columbus, Ohio. I always get a kick, and I've said this before, I always get a kick talking to lean practitioners as they put some of the lean principles to work in their lives outside of work. Do you have any lean principles as part of your tailgate? Have you ever looked at the tailgate process and tried to make it better or more efficient?
Would the fact that the totes are color coded and everything has to fit in a specific spot and certain things happen at certain times be along those lines of questioning?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Everything has a place, and if it's not in its place, it's clearly obvious to all. So, the grill goes in a certain spot, the tent goes in a certain spot, the totes go in a certain spot, the totes come out in a certain order, the totes go back in a certain order. There's some visual cues that allow, because sometimes at the end of a tailgate, you have folks who have maybe had a great time all day long and they want to help. So you've definitely got to have some visual management in place to make sure those folks can help you and not break stuff. So yes, absolutely. If you're really doing this stuff, it goes beyond your workplace. It kind of takes over everything. It can go in your refrigerator, like the milk has a spot. There might be some labels. There might be some things happening. Your shirts might be hung up in order by color. There's just a lot of things that can happen, Dan, in this world of lean and Six Sigma if it really gets in there and plants in your brain.
I have got to see this tailgate in action, Ken. I think that is outstanding. Thank you so much for joining us here at Quality Time with MoreSteam. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and there's still so much more to talk about. I hope that you will join the show again, and maybe we could do an on-location remote at that tailgate to show all of the lean principles at work before a Buckeye game on a Saturday.
That would be fabulous, Dan. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ken. We're only a few weeks away from tailgate season, and I cannot wait to see you put your lean skills in action on a crisp fall Saturday afternoon. And thank you for listening to Quality Time with MoreSteam. You can email the show at qualitytime@moresteam.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast service. Also, please go ahead and visit our website, moresteam.com, to learn about the software and tools that can help you solve problems, eliminate waste, and do things better. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more Quality Time with MoreSteam. Thanks again.